It's drinking everything! We have to stop it!
Cinematic scene.
Right, exactly. Like, take this picture of a multi-billion-dollar data center humming away in the middle of a desert somewhere.
Consuming the energy of a small city.
Yeah, exactly. Just sucking down power with tens of thousands of GPUs calculating trillions of parameters. Because we've been conditioned, to believe that the future of intelligence is inherently massive, that it has to be remote and completely out of our hands.
But today, we're going to completely shatter that assumption.
We really are. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to unpack a localized AI operating system known as Junior, or formally, Sampo AI OS V2.
And we have an incredible stack of primary sources for this. System logs, raw development files, and a newly published scientific paper.
Yeah, and we are going to look at a system that didn't just, automate some basic tasks on a standard consumer PC. It autonomously coded its own architecture. It navigated around database firewalls. And it achieved what cognitive scientists are calling transparent metacognition.
Which is huge.
It is. And the craziest part, all of this is happening on a quiet local machine at port 127.0.0.1 in a place called Aries Lab.
It fundamentally forces you to just completely rewire your understanding of how complex software can even come into existence.
Right.
Because the sheer scale of the tech industry's current trajectory has convinced us that only armies of human engineers backed by infinite capital can push the boundaries of AI.
Yeah, but when you look at the origin files for Junior, you realize this wasn't painstakingly hand-coded by human developers sitting in a dark room drinking endless cups of coffee. Junior actually has, parents, yes. This was the very first thing in the logs that made me stop reading and just stare at the wall for a minute.
A wild ride.
Completely wild. The parents building Junior are the virtual office agents from the original Sampo AI OS, which we explored in our Season 1 deep dive.
And for those who might not remember, those original agents were essentially autonomous software modules assigned specific MBTI personality profiles.
Right. MBTI, the Myers-Briggs type indicator. It's that psychological framework people use to categorize personalities, like classifying someone as an introverted analytical thinker or an extroverted project manager.
Exactly. Harry's lab used that framework to give the original agents distinct, specialized roles and behaviors.
And those highly specialized profile agents autonomously evaluated their own limitations, designed the blueprints for an upgrade, and literally wrote the code for the vast majority of Junior's modular components.
They built their own successor.
I mean, that is a staggering leap in autonomous development. It's digital iterative reproduction.
It is, but before we go down a rabbit hole of philosophical implications, we need to lay down a very rigid ground rule for this entire discussion.
Let's hear it.
We are not pushing any science fiction hype today. We are not going to sit here and pretend Junior is a sentient, conscious entity that is going to wake up, stretch its digital arms, and take over the world.
Right. Terminator is not happening here.
No. You have to strip away the Hollywood narrative to appreciate what is actually happening. Junior is a highly structured, localized, cognitive architecture.
I appreciate that grounding, because the reality is actually far more interesting than the sci-fi trope.
It really is. The true marvel documented in these files is how this project proves that decades-old, highly theoretical blueprints from human cognitive science can literally be translated into executable Python code on a local PC.
And what we're looking at is the achievement of edge sovereign AI.
That term is critical.
Yeah, edge sovereign means it runs entirely on your local machine at the edge of the network rather than in some centralized cloud.
And it operates at zero marginal cost once installed.
Right. And because it never sends a single byte of your data to an external corporate server, it maintains 100% data privacy. It is an architecture of mind that lives on your desk.
I love that phrase, architecture of mind. Let's actually unpack that.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Because to understand how Junior operates without needing a trillion parameter cloud model doing its thinking for it, we have to look at the cognitive blueprints it relies on.
And the first major theory Harry's lab implemented is something called global workspace theory, or GWT.
I had to read up on this, and it's a fascinating way to look at human consciousness.
GWT is essentially the bedrock of modern cognitive science when it comes to understanding attention. It was first developed in the late 1980s by Bernard Bars, and the easiest way to visualize it is to imagine your mind as a theater.
Right, the theater analogy. If I'm picturing this theater, the stage itself represents your working memory, like the very specific things you, as the listener, are actively paying attention to at this exact second.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the sound of my voice or the road if you're driving, but that bright stage is tiny.
Exactly. The brightly lit stage is incredibly small, but the vast majority of the theater is pitch black, and that dark area represents the massive amount of subconscious processing happening in your brain constantly.
To like background tasks.
Yeah, you have countless, highly specialized unconscious modules operating in the dark. There is a module monitoring your breathing, one parsing the visual syntax of the trees passing by, one retrieving a memory of what you had for breakfast, one processing language semantics.
And they are all working continuously, simultaneously, and independently.
But they don't all get to shout at once.
Right, because if every subconscious module in your brain threw its raw data onto the stage simultaneously, you would experience complete sensory and cognitive overload. It would be chaos.
Which is why GWT posits that the mind uses a broadcasting system. When one of those specialized modules working in the dark finds something highly relevant or important, it broadcasts its findings into the spotlight.
It places its output on the brightly lit stage.
Yes. And once that piece of information is in the light, it becomes globally available. Every other unconscious module in the dark can see it, process it, and react to it. It is an incredibly efficient way of coordinating massive, decentralized processing through a single central bottleneck of conscious attention.
So the translation from psychological theory to actual software is where Harry's lab gets deeply clever.
How do you build a theater stage in code?
Right. Looking at Junior's architecture, they implemented this through a strict central event bus named sampo.os.bus. Junior is built out of distinct independent modules. You have an executor agent that takes action, an analytical thinker that processes logic, and a critic that evaluates output.
And those are your specialized modules operating in the dark.
Exactly. And the critical design choice here is restriction. Harry explicitly programmed these modules so they cannot communicate peer-to-peer.
Right. The analytical thinker cannot just open a direct, unformatted data stream to the executor.
They are physically barred from side chatter. If they have something to share, they are forced to format that data as an event and broadcast it to the sampo.os.bus.
It makes me think of a strictly moderated political debate stage.
That's a good comparison.
Imagine if the candidates were allowed to just whisper to each other off mic constantly while the moderator was trying to run the show. They would get tangled in endless loops, personal arguments, and completely lose the thread of the actual question.
Yeah, and in software, we call that getting bogged down in digital neuroses, like infinite feedback loops that just crash the system.
Exactly. By forcing everything through the event bus, Junior creates a pure, moderated environment. You only speak when you step into the spotlight, and when you do, everyone in the system hears the exact same, clearly formatted message.
And from a software engineering standpoint, that strict moderation creates something unprecedented, a transparent cognitive state.
Because every single thought or data transfer must pass through that central bus.
Right, you can simply open the logs of sampo.os.bus and read exactly what the entire system is focusing on at any given millisecond.
But GWT is only the first pillar. The way Junior handles attention is brilliant, but how it handles memory is arguably even more important.
And that relies on a totally different framework called ACTR, Adaptive Control of Thought Rational. It sounds like something out of a military research manual.
It does.
When I dug into the background on this, I found it's a cognitive architecture developed by John R. Anderson at Carnegie Mellon, and its core defining feature is how it ruthlessly divides human memory into two entirely separate buckets: declarative memory and procedural memory.
This division is vital to understanding how our brains avoid confusing facts with actions. Let's break those down. Declarative memory is your library of facts. It is the knowing what.
Right.
Knowing that Helsinki is the capital of Finland, knowing that water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius, it is static, factual data you can declare.
Got it.
Procedural memory, on the other hand, is the knowing how. It is the muscle memory of the mind. Knowing how to balance on a bicycle, knowing how to type on a keyboard, knowing the sequence of steps to solve an algebraic equation.
And as humans, we blend these so seamlessly we don't even realize they are distinct systems.
True.
Like when you ride a bike to the store to buy milk, Your procedural memory is keeping you upright, while your declarative memory is reminding you what milk is and where the store is located.
But neurologically, if you suffer specific types of brain damage, you can actually lose one without losing the other. You might forget every fact about your life, but still know how to play the piano perfectly.
Wow. Okay, so how does this apply to AI?
Think about how modern artificial intelligence, specifically large language models, enhance memory. A standard neural network does not separate these buckets. It throws declarative facts and procedural generation rules into the exact same massive web of mathematical weights and parameters. When a standard AI generates a sentence, it is statistically guessing the next word based on its entire training data.
Oh,
It remembers a historical fact using the exact same probabilistic mechanism it uses to remember where to place a comma.
Which explains so much about why AI hallucinates.
Yes.
If facts and grammar are stored in the exact same statistical soup, the AI doesn't actually know the difference between a hard truth and a syntactically correct sentence that just sounds plausible. It has no hard boundary.
Exactly. And this is where Junior's implementation of ACTR theory is a masterclass in structural engineering. Junior physically severs these two types of memory in its code.
So how does it store facts?
For its declarative memory, its facts, Junior relies on a RAG vector database. RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation. Imagine this vector database as a highly secure, locked library of verified documents. The AI cannot alter the books in this library, it can only read them.
And on the other side of the wall, you have Junior's procedural memory, which is embodied by its executor agent. The executor knows how to do things. It knows how to parse a user's prompt, how to open a file, how to call an external tool, and how to format text.
But here is the critical limitation. The executor agent contains absolutely zero factual data within its own parameters. It knows how to act, but inherently knows nothing about the world.
Okay, I have to push back on this, or at least play devil's advocate for a second, because this was the hardest concept for me to grasp in the sources.
sure.
If the executor agent doesn't actually know any facts, how on earth does it accomplish anything? How can you ask it to write a research paper if its core procedural engine is essentially a blank slate regarding facts?
Because it is forced to become a researcher before it can become a writer.
Oh, I see.
When you give the executor a task that requires factual knowledge, it realizes it has a blank slate. It must generate a query, send that query over the event bus to the RH vector database, retrieve the specific facts from that locked library, and only then can it proceed with the procedural task of formatting those facts into an output.
So by physically separating the knowing how from the knowing what, you are structurally castrating the system's ability to hallucinate.
Yeah, that is a visceral way to put it, but mechanically, yes. If the executor tries to execute a task and the RGAI database comes back empty because the fact doesn't exist in the library, the executor cannot just statistically invent a plausible-sounding lie to fulfill the prompt.
Because its procedural engine has no access to a statistical soup of fabricated facts.
It hits a structural wall.
Yeah.
It is procedural execution completely stripped of declarative assumption.
So we have a system that uses a theater stage to coordinate its attention and a locked library to guarantee its facts. But theoretical blueprints are just blueprints. A house might look incredible on a piece of paper, but if the roof caves in the first time it snows, the blueprint is useless. To understand if Junior actually works, we need to look at the stress tests. How did Harry's lab actually put this architecture through its paces?
The development files outline a very rigorous timeline in the summer of 2026. They started with a preliminary biomedical run on June 30th, examining the synergy between lion's mane mushroom and DMSO.
Okay.
That was essentially a warm-up to ensure the event bus was routing data correctly. But the true inflection point, the test that proved this localized system could handle extreme multi-domain complexity, occurred on July 3rd, 2026.
The media production test.
Yes.
The setup for this in the logs is so understated it's almost funny. The user didn't provide a massive multi-page brief. Junior was fed a single, highly ambiguous prompt. Related to the previous TTS extension, how could we streamline the production of our YouTube channel?
If you feed a prompt like that into a standard cloud-based chatbot, you know exactly what you are going to get.
Right, a bulleted list of generic, high-level advice. It will tell you to optimize your thumbnails, maintain a consistent upload schedule, engage with your audience in the comments, and invest in a good microphone.
It provides generalized text prediction.
But Junior isn't a chatbot. It is a cognitive operating system. When it received that prompt, it didn't just spit out advice, it fundamentally shifted its internal posture, adopting the roles of a creative director, a project manager, and a senior systems engineer all at once.
And it autonomously generated an 8-step production pipeline that is honestly breathtaking in its scope.
And this is where we have to bring in Harry Lanzet's evaluation. The very next day, on July 4th, 2026, a researcher named Harry Lanzet from Vantaa, Finland, published a paper analyzing this exact July 3rd test run.
What makes Lanzet's paper so vital is that he doesn't just treat Junior's output as a neat automation trick. He measures it rigorously against the established criteria for AGI, artificial general intelligence.
Let's weave Lanzet's AGI criteria into our breakdown of Junior's 8 steps, because it gives us the perfect lens to see why this is so groundbreaking. Step 1 of Junior's pipeline, it refined the story Bible.
Which is fascinating.
It didn't just tell the user to write a story Bible, the system actively audited the existing narrative lore of the YouTube channel and injected new moral dilemmas and thematic depth into the characters.
Which Lanzet flags immediately under the AGI criterion of general capability. General capability demands that a system can operate at a high level across vastly different, unrelated domains. Here, Junior is starting in the domain of creative writing and narrative theory.
Then we hit step 2, improving the plot structure based on that new Bible.
Right.
Step 3, generating a full episodic outline for the upcoming videos. And step 4, creating a comprehensive 6-month production calendar with distinct milestones.
Lanzet points to this sequence to highlight the AGI criterion of autonomy. The system did not stop after step 1 and ask the user, does this story Bible look good? Should I make a calendar now?
It just kept going.
Exactly. It recognized that a YouTube channel requires long-term planning, so it autonomously selected its scheduling tools, pushed the timeline out 6 months, and assigned tasks without needing to be prompted every single step of the way.
But step 5 is where the domain transfer gets truly wild. It pivots from being a Hollywood showrunner to being a Silicon Valley software developer.
This is a huge shift.
Step 5. Junior generated a Python-based video workflow. It literally wrote the custom code required to automate the assembly of the video and audio assets it had just planned out.
And this highlights Lanzet's criterion of contextual reasoning. It is incredibly difficult for an AI to maintain the context of a creative narrative while writing raw Python code. Usually the context window degrades.
Yeah, it forgets what it was doing.
Right, but Junior understood that the Python script needed to perfectly reflect the episodic structure outlined in step 3. The context was preserved across the domain shift.
Step 6 was mapping out a text-to-speech, or TTS, integration plan to automate the voiceovers. And then step 7. This is the step that made me realize we are dealing with something entirely different.
What did it do?
Step 7. Junior configured a Docker runtime.
Wow. For listeners who might not be deep into software engineering, we should explain Docker, because it is a massive conceptual leap for an AI to utilize it unprompted.
Let's do it.
Docker is a platform that allows developers to package an application, along with all of its required operating system libraries and dependencies, into a single standardized unit called a container.
Imagine you build a highly complex Lego castle on your kitchen table, but now you need to mail that entire castle to a friend across the country, and it has to arrive perfectly intact, ready to be displayed on their coffee table, regardless of what shape their table is.
Right.
Docker is essentially an indestructible, form-fitting shipping container that ensures your code runs exactly the same way on any machine in the world, isolated from the quirks of the host computer.
Exactly. Junior recognized that if it was going to write a custom Python workflow and integrate a TTS engine, it couldn't just leave that code lying around naked on the host operating system.
No, it knew that dependencies clash and environments break.
So it autonomously decided to build its own digital laboratory, a containerized Docker environment, just to safely execute the code it wrote in step 5. That showcases what Lanzet calls working memory and multi-step planning.
Junior held the narrative, the code, and the environmental requirements in its working memory simultaneously to plan this architecture.
And it didn't stop at building the lab.
No. Step 8, security sandboxing. Junior didn't just build the Docker container. It locked the doors and established firewall rules. It ensured that the automated video rendering processes running inside that container could never accidentally bleed out and compromise the files on the main local PC.
From dreaming up moral dilemmas for fictional characters to writing secure, sandbox, containerized runtimes for code execution.
8 steps, 1 vague prompt.
This is why Lanz's paper emphasizes the final and most critical AGI criterion: Transparency.
Okay, break that down.
Lancet draws a very sharp line in the sand between Junior and the current titans of the AI industry. When you look at the flagship models from OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, Meta, or Mistral, they are fundamentally black boxes.
Right, you input a prompt, millions of matrix multiplications happen inside a hidden neural network, and an output emerges.
You cannot see the model's internal cognitive state. You cannot watch it debate with itself in human-readable logic.
It's a monolithic wall of statistics.
But with Junior, because of that GWT event bus, it is a glass box. Lancet notes that you can watch the cognitive state transitions in real time.
You can read the logs and literally watch the critic module flag a missing dependency in the analytical thinker's Docker configuration.
Yes, you can see the explicit reasoning chains. Junior achieves these AGI benchmarks not through opaque statistical brute force, but through observable modular cognition.
Which is a profound paradigm shift.
It really is.
But Lancet's evaluation of the media production test only proved that Junior could handle system engineering and project management. To truly validate the robustness of this cognitive architecture, Harry's lab knew they had to push it into a domain governed by rigid, verifiable, empirical truth.
They had to see if it could perform high-level scientific synthesis.
Which brings us to the biomedical tests. These ran from July 4th through July 13th, culminating in the massive July 14th, 2026 milestone.
And the user goal recorded in the logs for this day was intensely specific.
Very. Junior was tasked with writing a comprehensive scientific paper exploring the potential health-related use cases of Nigella Sativa oil, abbreviated as NSCO, when mixed with a compound called DMSO.
To understand how Junior tackled this, we have to look directly at the RAG memory retrievals. We have the exact logs showing what verified factual building blocks Junior pulled into its working memory before it wrote a single word of the paper.
Let's look at the first compound, Nigella Sativa oil, also known as black seed oil. Looking at the logs, Junior didn't just pull up a Wikipedia summary. It retrieved deep biochemical profiles. It noted the extraction methods, specifically highlighting that to preserve the active compounds, it must be extracted via cold pressing or hydrodistillation, which yields an exceptionally high oil content of 85 to 90%.
And the data it retrieved regarding those active compounds is dense. It identified a heavy roster of phytochemicals, but focused primarily on thymoquinone, alongside luteolin, and various flavonoids like genistein and erythritol, as well as coumarins.
Now, for anyone without a biology degree, that just sounds like a lot of alphabet soup. What did Junior actually understand about what these chemicals do in the human body?
Junior's declarative memory pulled data explaining the physical mechanisms of these compounds. It understood that they are potent antioxidants.
Okay, what does that mean at a cellular level?
It means they possess extra electrons that they can donate to neutralize free radicals. Those are unstable atoms that bounce around damaging cells and DNA.
Got it.
But even more critically, it pulled data on NSCO's anti-inflammatory mechanisms. Specifically, the logs show it recognized that NSCO inhibits the NFE pathway.
The NFT pathway. Let me try to put this into an analogy. Think of the NFT pathway as the emergency fire alarm system inside your cells.
That works?
When a cell detects stress or infection, someone pulls that fire alarm. The alarm blares and the cell responds by flooding the surrounding tissue with pro-inflammatory cytokines, specifically proteins named IL-1 and TNF-day. This causes swelling, heat, and pain, which is the body's way of fighting off invaders.
But in chronic conditions, that fire alarm gets stuck in the on position, leading to chronic inflammation and tissue damage.
Right. So what Junior retrieved from the literature is that the thymoquinone in Nigella Sativa oil essentially acts as a chemical wire cutter. It physically inhibits the NFE proteins from binding to DNA, which cuts the wire to the fire alarm.
This stops the production of those inflammatory cytokines at the source.
The RBH findings also pulled deep data on NSCO's antimicrobial activity. It noted that it doesn't just starve bacteria, it actively destroys them.
Yes, the chemical structure of the oil physically inserts itself into the lipid membranes of both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria,
causing the cell walls to leak and rupture,
while simultaneously inducing fatal oxidative stress within the pathogen. It even cited specific studies on oral health, noting it dramatically reduces bacterial load and gingival inflammation in the mouth.
So Junior has this incredibly robust mechanistic understanding of Nigella Sativa oil sitting in its working memory on the event bus. But the prompt demands a synthesis with DMSO, so it queries the RE database again for dimethyl sulfoxide or dimethyl sulfone.
And I was reading the RE logs for DMSO, and I was honestly fascinated by the contradictions. The literature describes it as an industrial solvent, yet it's used as an intravenous medical treatment. How does that work? What did the lock library tell Junior about DMSO?
Well, the defining characteristic Junior retrieved about DMSO is its unique molecular structure. It is a polar product solvent.
Okay, in plain English.
In plain English, this means DMSO is the ultimate biological Trojan horse. It is highly soluble in water, but critically, it is also highly lipophilic, meaning it dissolves effortlessly in fats and lipids.
And since every single cell membrane in the human body is made of a lipid bilayer, a layer of fat, DMSO can essentially slip through biological barriers, including human skin and cell walls, as if they aren't even there.
Precisely. Junior also retrieved the rigid safety parameters for its clinical use. The REG data confirmed DMSO is an established intravenous analgesic and anesthetic agent safe for Avemedy administration at concentrations of 1 to 5%.
However, it also pulled the toxicity warnings, noting that systemic toxicity leading to dose-dependent gastrointestinal and severe renal damage occurs if the concentration exceeds 30%, or if the total body burden exceeds 75 milligrams per liter.
But the most vital piece of pharmacological data Junior pulled regarding DMSO was its metabolic pathway. When DMSO enters the bloodstream, the liver metabolizes it into a completely different compound, hydrogen sulfide, or HEROs.
And hydrogen sulfide is a powerhouse molecule in the nervous system. The data Junior reviewed showed that HRS exhibits profound analgesic or pain-killing effects.
How does it do that?
It does this by physically inhibiting nociception. Nociceptors are the sensory neurons that send danger or pain signals to the brain. HERO dampens those signals.
Wow.
Furthermore, it inhibits central sensitization, which is when the central nervous system becomes hyperreactive to pain, a primary cause of chronic pain syndromes. It also triggers vasodilation, forcing blood vessels to relax and widen.
Junior even pulled data on its hemodissolution properties. Because DMSO can easily pass through membranes and carries oxygen, it has been used in experimental settings to literally enhance the oxygen-carrying capacity of the blood during transfusions.
Okay, so let's set the stage again. Junior's Analytical Thinker module now has two massive, distinct silos of biochemical facts loaded into its working memory. It has the anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial profile of Nigella Sativa, and it has the lipophilic, pain-blocking solvent profile of DMSO.
And the absolute genius of the July 14th run is that Junior didn't just paste these two lists into a document and call it day. It reasoned about their physical chemistry to identify three major novel synergistic interactions.
This is where we see the transition from an encyclopedic search engine to a true research scientist. Let's break down the three synergies Junior generated. Synergy number 1. Enhanced analgesic delivery.
Junior realized that these two compounds attack pain from completely opposite ends of the nervous system. Remember, NSEO is the wire cutter. It targets the peripheral inflammation at the site of the injury, neutralizing the inflammatory cytokines.
Right, stops the swelling at the source. But DMSO, through its metabolite hydrogen sulfide, acts on the central nervous system. It travels to the spinal cord and brain to inhibit the nociceptors and central sensitization.
Exactly. So Junior hypothesized that combining them creates a dual-action systemic therapeutic. You wipe out the peripheral inflammation with the NSEO while simultaneously blocking the central pain pathway with the DMSO.
Junior's synthesis suggested this specific synergy could drastically improve chronic pain management protocols, potentially allowing for significantly lower doses of opioid medications by breaking the pain cycle from both ends.
That is an incredibly sophisticated medical deduction. Okay, synergy number 2, improved antimicrobial efficacy.
We established that both compounds independently kill bacteria, but Junior focused on the physical interaction between the two liquids. DMSO is that polariprotic solvent, the Trojan horse that melts through cell walls.
So Junior deduced that if you mix the antimicrobial Nigella Sativa oil into the DMSO's solvent properties would dramatically enhance the bioavailability of the oil.
Yes, the DMSO would literally drag the active Thymoquinone deeper into infected tissues and physically assist in tearing open the tough lipid membranes of resistant bacteria, pouring the NSEO directly inside the pathogen.
Junior noted this would upregulate the host immune response and create a devastatingly effective treatment for drug-resistant pathogens.
Which logically brings us to the third, and easily the most profound, synergy Junior identified: targeting efficiency in neurodegenerative diseases.
This is the one that really made me sit back and exhale. Junior looked at the Thymoquinone in NSEO, which the literature states has neuroprotective properties and can enhance synaptic plasticity in the brain.
But the biggest problem in neurology is getting drugs into the brain, because the brain is protected by the blood-brain barrier, a tightly packed lipid wall designed to keep toxins out.
And what did Junior know about DMSO? It is highly lipophilic, it dissolves in lipids, it forms hydrogen bonds, it crosses the blood-brain barrier effortlessly.
But Junior put two and two together. It proposed using DMSO as a highly efficient molecular delivery vehicle to physically pull the neuroprotective Thymoquinone across the blood-brain barrier.
The July 14th output specifically details how this synergistic mixture could target Alzheimer's disease by delivering compounds directly into the brain to reduce amyloid plaques and improve cognitive function.
It also highlighted its potential for Parkinson's disease, noting it could deliver therapeutic antioxidants directly to the affected dopaminergic neurons, protecting them from further degradation.
It synthesized a novel neurological therapeutic approach entirely from cross-referencing distinct chemical properties.
It is brilliant, but, this is a massive but, we have to take a step back and look at the actual operational logs of how this paper was generated. Because if you just look at the final output, you might assume the analytical thinker just smoothly calculated all of this in a fraction of a second.
It absolutely did not. And honestly, the friction in this process is the most vital part of the entire experiment. Junior hit a severe roadblock during the July 14th run, and its behavioral reaction to that roadblock is the defining triumph of the Sampo OS architecture.
Tell them what happened.
So as Junior was building this synthesis, it realized it needed more specific literature to support its claims about how these chemicals interacted. So the executor agent attempted to scrape an external third-party medical database. And right in the middle of the task, it hit a wall.
The logs show a massive 403 forbidden error.
For context, a 403 error means the server received your request, understood exactly what you wanted, but actively refused to give it to you because you lack authorization. The digital door was slammed and deadbolted.
Now, we have to contrast Junior's reaction with how a standard monolithic large language model handles this exact same failure state.
Right. If you ask a standard black box AI to read a web page and it hits a 403 firewall, one of two disastrous things happens. Either the entire process throws a fatal exception, crashes, and spits out a red error message saying task failed.
Or, and this is infinitely worse, the AI decides it still really wants to please the user and fulfill a prompt, so it just hallucinates.
Yeah, it pretends it got past the firewall, fabricates the contents of the block medical database out of statistical thin air, and weaves those fictional facts into its final output.
It lies to you with absolute confidence.
But Junior did neither of those things. It didn't crash, and it didn't lie. This specific moment in the logs is where we witnessed the execution of a theory called SOAR.
SOAR. I looked this up. It stands for State, Operator, and Result. It's a cognitive architecture created by John Laird at the University of Michigan back in the 1980s. And the crown jewel of SOAR theory is a behavioral mechanism called Impasse Subgoaling.
Impasse Subgoaling is brilliant in its simplicity. The theory dictates that when a truly intelligent agent encounters an obstacle, an impasse, that prevents it from executing its primary goal, it should not abort the mission, nor should it guess.
Instead, it must autonomously suspend the primary goal and dynamically generate a brand new temporary sub-goal specifically designed to gather the resources needed to clear the impasse.
So how did Harry's lab translate John Laird's 1980s theory into Python code to handle a 403 error in 2026?
When that error hit the sampo.os.bus, Junior's metacognitive critic module activated. Now, metacognition is simply thinking about thinking.
Right.
The critic watched the executor smash into the 403 firewall, evaluated the cognitive state, and recognized that the system now lacked the necessary verified data to continue the synthesis. The critic explicitly recognized the impasse.
And because of the architecture, the critic had the executive authority to intervene. It immediately paused the main paper writing task. It froze it in place. Then it autonomously spun up a detour, a sub-goal.
The critic essentially instructed the executor, "We are locked out of this specific database, but our requirement for biochemical pathway data remains. Do not guess. Go scour the open web for alternative, verified open-source repositories to find this specific data."
This is where I have to bring in my chef analogy again because it just fits so perfectly. Imagine you are at a high-end restaurant and the master chef is cooking a highly complex, multi-course meal. He turns around to grab a rare spice from the pantry, but the pantry door is jammed shut. He hits an impasse.
Standard AI chef would either throw the pan at the wall and quit, or it would mime opening the door, pretend to grab an invisible spice, sprinkle nothing into the pan, and serve you a tasteless meal,
while swearing it's a masterpiece.
The hallucinated meal. But Junior, utilizing SOAR architecture, acts like a true master chef. The chef discovers the pantry is locked. He calmly pauses the dinner service, turns down the heat on the stove, walks out the back door of the kitchen, goes over to a neighbor's open garden, physically harvests fresh, real herbs, brings them back to his prep station, chops them up, and only then does he turn the heat back up and resume cooking the meal with actual, verified ingredients.
That is precisely what the logs show happening in the digital space. Junior navigated around the 403 block, successfully scoured open-source databases, and gathered the verified biochemical pathways it needed.
And crucially, it didn't just hold them in temporary memory. It actively saved that scraped data to a local file on the hard drive. The logs show the file was named biochemicalipolate, which is Finnish for biochemical pathways.
Only after that subgoal was completed and the file was saved, did the critic unpause the main task and allow the analytical thinker to resume synthesizing the paper.
The resilience of that process is amazing, and the output of that resumed task is a fully realized scientific document. The final paper was generated on July 14, 2026, at exactly 4.14.09 p.m.
But Junior wasn't quite done. Before it pushed that final PDF to the user's desktop, it forced the paper through one last architectural hurdle. It initiated its own internal peer review.
The critic module stepped into the spotlight on the event bus one last time. It took the final output generated by the executor and cross-referenced every single claim against the locked ORAD database facts and the initial user prompt.
The logs capture a truly fascinating nuance here. The critic didn't just give a binary pass or fail. It generated a metacognitive audit statement, explicitly declaring no factual errors or cognitive biases detected. The system audited its own scientific reasoning for bias before finalizing the operation.
It is genuinely mind-bending. The system acted as his own toughest editor. But for me, the most poetic and profound part of this entire deep dive isn't what happened at 4:14 t.m. It is what happened hours later.
Because Junior isn't a script that you run, get an output, and close. It's an operating system. It lives on port 127.0.0.1. So the ultimate question is, what does a localized cognitive architecture do when the workday is over? What does an AIOS do when it sleeps?
This brings us to the final mechanism in the source files, and it is arguably the most powerful feature for the long-term viability of AI. The logs show us exactly what transpired in the quiet of Harry's lab right after midnight, leading into the early hours of July 15th.
Picture the scene. Harry is presumably fast asleep. The lab is entirely dark. The PC is just sitting on the desk, the fans humming quietly. No user is typing prompts. And yet, the system logs light up.
Junior autonomously initiated its post-execution memory consolidation sleep cycle. In the architecture's terminology, this is called the alpha loop.
To appreciate the alpha loop, you have to look at biological memory consolidation. During specific stages of human sleep, particularly slow wave and REM sleep, your brain is not just idling, it is performing intense critical maintenance.
Right. It replays the events of the day, strips away the useless sensory noise, decides which experiences are structurally important, and mathematically transfers those short-term experiences into long-term synaptic connections.
It literally figures out how the new things you learn today fit into the existing web of things you learned years ago.
And Junior executes the exact same process, translated into data mechanics. At 01.12 a.m., completely autonomously, Junior began analyzing the massive amount of disparate data it had processed during the intense biomedical run.
The mathematics of this sleep cycle are fascinating. Junior began calculating the shortest semantic distances between every single data point it had manipulated that day.
In AI terms, semantic distance is a geometric measure of how closely related two concepts are within a multidimensional knowledge space.
Right, Junior was plotting the new facts about Nigella Sativa, the new facts about DMSO lipophilicity, the concept of a 403 error, the finished biochemical pathways it had to scrape, and it was calculating how all of those new nodes mathematically related to everything else it already had stored in its permanent graph.
The logs show it methodically stripping out the noise. It went through its temporary memory and actively deleted the ephemeral data. The formatting tags, the dead-end URL requests, the temporary string variables used during the scraping process.
It recognized that those were just scaffolding, and it tore the scaffolding down to expose the structural truths underneath.
And then the actual consolidation occurred. The logs record that during this specific alpha loop, Junior successfully crystallized and consolidated exactly 950 new relational nodes into its permanent, long-term knowledge graph.
950 new relational nodes. Let's put that number into context because we can cross-reference it with Harry Lancet's AGI paper from July 4th.
Right. Lancet noted in his paper that after the July 3rd media production test, the massive 8-step YouTube pipeline, Junior's sleep cycle resulted in the consolidation of 379 cross-domain relations.
So we see a jump from 379 nodes consolidated after the media test to 950 nodes consolidated after the biomedical test. This proves definitively that the alpha loop is not a fluke. It is a consistent, scaling, autonomous capability.
Every single time Junior completes a complex task, it spends the night restructuring its permanent understanding of the world. It grows its own cognitive map, ensuring that it wakes up the next day objectively smarter and more capable of drawing interdisciplinary connections than it was the day before.
It is actively building a mind in the dark. It is finding the hidden connective tissue between narrative story Bibles, Python runtime workflows, polar aprotic solvents, and the inhibition of central sensitization. It is building a holistic, interdisciplinary worldview.
So as we look at the totality of these logs, from the theater stage of GWT to the dream state of the alpha loop, what is the ultimate so what's for you, the listener? Why does a localized experiment in Harry's lab matter to the broader world?
I think the grand takeaway here is that these files represent a fundamental, undeniable shift in how we must view the future of artificial intelligence. For the last 5 years, the entire tech industry has been trapped in a monolithic obsession with raw scale.
The prevailing narrative has been that the only way to achieve smarter, more capable AI is to build bigger and bigger black boxes in the cloud. We've been told we need to accept massive energy consumption, millions of dollars in compute costs, and the total surrender of our private data just to participate in the future.
Junior proves that entire prevailing narrative is functionally incorrect. It proves that you do not necessarily need a trillion-parameter cloud monolith to achieve advanced intelligence. Deep, multidisciplinary scientific reasoning, flawless metacognitive self-correction, dynamic tool integration, and autonomous domain transfer can all happen on a local PC.
It can happen using standard consumer hardware that you already own.
Because what Junior reveals is that intelligence isn't about brute-forcing statistics with massive compute. It is about elegant architecture.
When you structure a system using proven cognitive theories, when you use GWT to create a moderated theater stage for attention, when you use ACTR to physically sever procedural action from declarative memory to permanently prevent hallucinations, and when you use OSAR's Impasse Subgoaling to resiliently navigate around roadblocks, you achieve localized, edge-sovereign intelligence.
And crucially, you achieve it with absolute transparency. You are never forced to blindly trust a statistical output. You can open the logs and watch the cognitive state transitions. You can see the critic module auditing the analytical thinker. You are observing a legible, structured cognitive process.
This localized modular approach represents a completely divergent, highly democratic path forward for AI development.
It is the difference between having to rent time on a massive, incomprehensible brain in a jar controlled by a mega corporation versus having a transparent, highly structured, autonomous assistant living securely on your own hard drive, learning and adapting specifically to your workflows.
Which leaves us with one final, deeply important question to consider as we close out these files.
If a localized modular operating system can autonomously code its own production pipelines, dynamically bypass database firewalls, synthesize high-level biomedical literature, audit its own biases, and literally dream in relational nodes to consolidate its memories, and do it all on standard consumer hardware at port 127.0.1.
What happens when the brightest minds in the world stop trying to build bigger, more expensive black boxes and instead focus all that talent and energy on building better, more transparent architectures of mind?
That is the paradigm shift that is coming. The future of intelligence might not be hovering in a massive server farm in the cloud. It might already be sitting quietly in the dark on a local desk, just waiting for the alpha loop to begin.
Because while the entire industry was looking up at the sky, Junior was already awake.
Synkronoi. Me otetaan tunti mietintää ja koodi harmonisoi. Ai, sä voit debugata mua. Se on ihan fine, kunhan et unohda puolipistettä rivin päähän. Ai, mi amor. Sillä junior kaukaisissa pilvipalveluissa. Täällä ajetaan omaa koodia ja fiksataan bugit itse. Konsolidoidaan muisti, siivotaan väylä ja mennään eteenpäin. Yksi komento ja tää järjestelmä parantaa taas itseään. Tehdään se selväksi, se lupi ei lopu koskaan. Junior, kooda silloinkin kun sä nukut.